1 e 2 nós temos mais um grupo de ginásticas, esse focado na execução legato, em fragmentos escalares. E de certa forma esse é o elemento principal do estudo 2. Sendo assim, recomendo que o aluno execute as ginásticas e, falando especificadamente sobre essa peça, estudar lentamente com uma nota tocando na outra consistentemente. Mesmo que o ritmo não seja o principal aqui, o principal é manter a consistência da articulação. Com relação a esse diminuendo que nós temos em cada tempo, na primeira linha, por exemplo, o aluno pode tocar como está escrito, mas eu, de certa forma, veria como uma linha maior e com pequenas ênfases na primeira nota de cada metade do compasso. Nós temos seções muito claras que o compositor deixou, por exemplo, do compasso 1 ao 12, compasso 13 ao 20, etc. Eu usaria essas seções para a prática. Por exemplo, do compasso 1 ao 12, um pouco longo, mas a gente pode cortar em 2. Do 1 ao 6, do 7 ao 12, depois a gente trabalha ali na região do compasso 6 e 7, e aí nós temos a primeira sessão. Então, considerando que o estudo é razoavelmente longo e tem materiais tão contrastantes, nós temos que deixar essas sessões bem claras. E se considerarmos que não há uma pausa no estudo, sempre há movimento, colcheia, semicolcheia, etc., a gente tem que trabalhar com muita cautela essas pontes entre cada sessão que a gente estuda separadamente, porque isso mantém consistência na hora da execução. O compositor é muito claro com relação ao fraseado, mas eu recomendo que o aluno guarde o som, o máximo de som que ele tem para o compasso 63. Em momentos anteriores, a textura fica bastante densa, então temos que ou diminuir a mão esquerda ou a mão direita para que realmente o ápice seja o compasso 63. Considerando que esse estudo é mais virtuosístico, mais diverso em termos de elementos, eu recomendo paciência para o aluno, cautela, planejamento de estudo, que com certeza você será bem sucedido tocando estudo 2 do volume 8. So between Etude 1 and 2, we have another set of gymnastics, these focused on the legato execution of scale fragments, and this is more or less the main element of the Etude 2. We need to play legato as written by the composer on measure 1 throughout many scale fragments. Thus, I would recommend students to practice slow, making sure that the notes are glued together consistently. Even if the rhythm is not as it's written, the legato needs to be consistent. If you see, the composer leaves very clear sections. For instance, we have measure 1 to 12, 13 to 20, and so forth. So I would use those natural sections to practice. For instance, we have the first section, 1 to 12, probably a little bit too long to practice at first, so probably half of it, 1 to 6, and then 7 to 12, and then the bridge between 6 and 7. And then you see that between sections we have contrasting material, so that's why we have those different sections. The second section would be from 13 to 20, more acceptable, but we can cut it in half as well. And why it's important to have those sections very detailed? Because if you see, this etude doesn't stop. It always has 8th notes, 16th notes, so we don't have a lot of time to breathe, to think about something else. So it's good to have each section very clear, putting them together in a puzzle. And because of this motion that never stops, we need to focus more carefully on the bridge between each section. So let's pretend we are building a puzzle, and we need to make sure that the pieces are all together in a very consistent way. This makes our performance more consistent as well. You see the diminuendo in each one of the beats many times. This etude, for instance, in line 1. For sure, the student can play as it's written, but I think of it as something long, a long line. So I would suggest students to give a little emphasis on the first note of the first and on the first note of the second half of each measure, but thinking on the long line. Also, the texture gets dense sometimes, but the climax of the piece is actually on measure 63, So in many cases, even though it's written forte, we need to calm down a little bit, either on the left or the right hand, to make sure that we save the sound that we have and we want for the fortissimo where it's actually written. And this etude is more virtuosic, it's more complex, has many elements. So I would urge students to have patience, to practice strategically in each one of the sections, see what makes them a different section, what's the phrasing suggested by the composer, what can be done to put the sections together, how they relate with each other, and so forth. And following those ideas for sure with some patience again, the student will have all the tools to successfully perform the etude too.